guys, it's Brianna with Pips and Chicks Auctions, and today we are going to be walking through what quality means in poultry. So maybe you're getting birds for the first time, maybe you're new into the show world, maybe you're just checking out our auction sites. You're probably going to hear a whole bunch of different terms getting thrown around. You'll hear show quality, breeder quality, good quality, bad quality, hatchery quality, industrial quality, commercial quality. All of them getting attached to this word kind of quality. But there's not a whole lot of definition out there onto what this means. That was one of the first things when I was creating the auction site that we would get repeatedly over and over and over. What does quality mean? So I figured I'd create this video to help on out. So if you like it, be sure to like and subscribe and follow along for more, as we'll have more coming on in the spring and summer. So on Pips and Chicks Auctions, we break it down into 3 different categories. So we've got our show quality, we've got our purebred and production, and we've got our fun and mixed quality. And so we start off, and this is just what we use on our auction site. There's no hard and fast definition out there, but this is kind of a group across the board what different people deem for different qualities. We found this allows the most amount of different breeders together that still breed towards a very similar goal, while putting it into clearly defined categories for the people looking. So for our show quality, these are lines bred towards the standard of perfection by active association members. Usually that's the APA, the ABA, could be the American Caturnix Breeders Association, a breed club that puts a standard out saying this is what the best bird should be like for this breed, this species, and then usually how to judge it in the showroom. And then it's a breeder that is working towards that in the standard. Our second category is purebred and production. So these are lines and breeds that are bred for production traits like eggs and meat. So really the 2 reasons we usually keep chickens. And these are purebred lines. They're not mixing different breeds together, things like that. And then our third category is fun and mixed. So these are lines designed for something outside of egg and meat production. So they can just be to look pretty, they can just be to be friendly, they can just be for fun. These are our fun and mixed categories. And so all of these sellers on our auction site are still deemed quality because of these 3 things. They're prioritizing animal welfare. So they're prioritizing their animals' health and happiness above just about anything else. They're prioritizing good animal husbandry practices. So this means they're taking care of their animals appropriately. They're setting up breeding pens right. They're feeding and watering them. Their animals are in good condition and generally kept well. And the third thing they're prioritizing is buyer relationships. So not only do they want their animals to be the best that they can be, but they want their animals and they want everyone else's experiences with them to be the best that they can be. So they're communicating well. They are talking with us on the auction site well. That means they're shipping out eggs with the best practices. So that means you're getting your animals and you have the best likelihood of hatching out good birds from their eggs, right? So all of our sellers, regardless of what they're breeding for, count and get that verified seller badge on our auction site if they follow these 3 things. And so you can have people that are show quality, but maybe they don't have good practices and good animal husbandry, or maybe they don't prioritize buyer relationships. In our minds, that means that they're not going to get that little quality seller, verified seller mark, and they won't be able to sell on our site, right? So let's start off with what each of these categories, give some examples, and show how there can be a little bit of variation. So our show quality usually encompasses what you'll hear other people call breeder quality on Facebook groups, things like that. We aren't going through and we aren't policing all of their birds, right? We aren't saying, hey, none of your birds can ever hatch any defects. That's not realistic. But again, what our definition was they need to be an active association member breeding towards a standard. So that can look like a new kid that just joined the APA as a junior member. They got their first birds maybe 6 months ago, attended one show, and they're still learning, right? Have a copy of their standard. They're setting their breeder pens up. That still counts as show quality, even though they may not have any wins under their belts. They may only have had their birds for a little bit. They're still considered show quality listings in our auction. You may see an ABA judge's birds, so they may not show their birds anymore, but they're judging different shows. So they clearly know their standard. They're clearly still breeding towards their standard, even if they aren't showing the birds, because they can't show usually where you're judging. But they've been doing it for a long time. They're an active member of the association, and they're breeding for those standards. Then you've kind of got your grandmaster exhibitor, that gold star, what everyone wants to get to. They're showing birds for decades. They're consistently at the top of the class in the shows. Our auctions page has several grandmaster exhibitors that have listed auctions in the past and will hopefully keep doing it in the future. And so these are people that have been doing it for a really long time. Obviously, they're still part of that breeders club. They're helping establish the standard even more by showing what really good birds should look like. They're winning shows. They've got good birds. Again, that's kind of that's in that mix that counts as show quality. Something that people may not normally consider show quality, but we do, is quail breeders and pigeon breeders, right? They can be members of the ACBA or the Pigeon Breeders Association. They could be relatively new or experienced in there, and maybe they've only gone to online shows, but they're part of that organization, right? Even if that isn't accepted in the APA yet, they're part of an organization that has set forth a breed standard, and they're breeding towards that standard and working to improve it. And the third one that's show quality is that, again, maybe a little bit more on the controversial side, but the farmer that shows at the state fair, right, or just one show in the area takes his chickens to every single year. Just to say that he can, just to say that he does. He's got the membership card, he uses it for discounts, but he goes every year pretty consistently, and he's still breeding his birds. Maybe just to get a red ribbon instead of a third place, but he's still breeding his birds to be better. So a little bit controversial. We consider that show quality because, again, they're an active part of the association, and they're still breeding their birds to better fit the standards. So there's a lot of variance in here, right? You can still get birds that are defective or with defects or disqualifications. You can still get breeders here that don't really know how far a whole lot yet. They're still learning, they're still growing. And then on the flip side, you can get breeders that are top-notch that you really want to get your birds from, right? So just because it says it's show quality doesn't mean it's necessarily something that is hard and fast and always going to... it's not something that's hard and fast, and it's not something that's always going to mean you're going to get those best show birds possible, but hopefully this helps vet it through a little bit when you're looking for your next show birds. And then we've got our purebred in production, and we wanted to give a lot of credit to the breeders that aren't breeding for the APA. So maybe they're not winning awards out here, but they're still doing some really good breed work, right? Hatcheries is a huge one on this list. You'll often hear people diss on hatcheries, and they'll say, oh, they're just breeding for money, which is true. Money is a goal for them, right? But because that they are as efficient as they are, and they are doing things on such a high volume, they can afford to hire people like poultry science. So a lot of hatcheries actually are going to be hiring poultry science majors and people out of college with a poultry science degree to help them make their breeding decisions, to help them set up the pens better, to track their production, track their flocks, things like that, make sure animal welfare. They can afford to do things that breeders on an APA show level just can't do. So hatcheries are breeding usually for a purebred. They're not towards the standard whatsoever. They'll have a lot of defects or disqualifications in color and in type. But they're breeding for eggs and meat. They're breeding for two big production traits, things like hatchability, customer service. Those count as purebred in production here. Relaxed 4-H breeders. 4-H breeders here is a great place to be in purebred and production. So they may be doing this for the fair. They may focus on market birds, raising their heritage birds for that market, or conditioning, making sure these are purebred birds in really good condition for that fair, and they're breeding their birds to be the best that they can for the fair, but not towards the actual APA standard. Purebred and production. The other really good category or type of breeder that falls into this is the landrace breeds. So things like the American Bressy, which, while they have an association, they don't have a standard that says this is what the perfect bird should look like, because they're breeding for meat quality, they're breeding for meat efficiency and rate of gain, things like that. That goes into purebred and production because it's a pure bird bred for very defined production traits, right? New project varieties. So I've got a friend that's breeding for Creole Americana. That is a purebred bird. It doesn't have a defined, it doesn't have a proposed standard or a breed club. It's still purebred, and it's still breeding towards some of those production traits. So good egg laying, healthy birds, but it's not accepted, and they're not really working for acceptance seriously yet. It's more of a project. The other thing that falls into this really well is university birds. So birds kept for research, like your production leghorns kept for research. Great place for the purebred in production. They're one breed, they're not hybrids or anything like that, but they're kept for they're kept a pure line, and they're kept for class purposes or production. So the last category is our fun and mixes. And again, this one still gets a little bit controversial because do you call them quality? We do. Again, these are all breeders that are going to be prioritizing their animal health, their animal happiness, and customer relations, right? So good communication skills through and through. They're keeping their birds well, and they're breeding their birds to be better, just maybe not the traits most people would think of when they think of chickens. So for us, that counts as our Easter eggers. So our crosses that are our F1 Easter eggers, where you cross an Americana with a Marans, and you got an olive egger, right? Those are just bred for pretty eggs. You can say they're bred for egg production, but really it's bred for pretty eggs. So those go in here. Birds bred for temperament. If you've got a line, you're trying to make the friendliest bird possible, or birds that don't crow. I hear that once in a while too. Those fall into the fun and mixture categories. You may be mixing breeds, you may be mixing different backgrounds. You may have a purebred line of this, or one breed that's gone into this. However, you're breeding for something that's more of a fun trait than a production trait. Not to take it away from your breeding skills, it's just this is a better category because it's not necessarily production. New breeds. So anyone that's developing a new breed without a breed club and a breed standard, remember you need both, to count as fun and mixes, even if they're being bred for a production trait. Usually you're combining 3, 4, 5 different breeds together to get the best traits of both, especially in those early stages. Those go in here. The no clue, but it looks pretty neat. Some people, like zombie chickens, I see that quite a bit, where you're just crossing 2 breeds randomly to get something that looks really nice out. That falls in here. You still may be breeding for, your zombie chickens may still be breeding for good egg traits, but ultimately it's a cross, so they stay in here. And then your mixed flocks. So you've got people that are buying a whole bunch of breeders from buying a whole bunch of different birds from good quality breeders, right? They may have an Americana rooster and 5 different breeds of hens, and they're just letting them run together in their backyard. They're still good breeders. They're still doing good animal husbandry. They're communicating well. They've got a good page established and followings and things like that. But they're not necessarily breeding towards a standard. They're just caring that their birds are healthy, well-fed, produce. Those fall into here. So again, all of these count as still quality breeders for us because they are breeding for good traits. It just depends on what they're breeding for, right? And so on our auction site, we do our best to sort everyone into those categories appropriately. So we vet all of our sellers as they're coming in to make sure that they're NPIP, making sure they're following regulations. If they've got a Facebook page and a website, we're going on those to make sure that their animals are kept really nice, right? And then before they ever post an auction, so before those auctions get listed, we're going through and we're making sure that they're in the right categories. So again, our categories aren't meant to be all-encompassing because everyone's breeding for different traits, but they're still meant to be a good first step to help divide that out when people starting out for birds are still going to get the birds that they're looking for in their categories. So check us out on our auctions page. Send me a message if you've got any other questions, and hopefully you have a good rest of your day.